maybe I can make it there for a few minutes.
Good morning, Honorable Klamath County Commissioners. My name is Dan Johnson. I flew out here from Bowling Green, Ohio to support this resolution. I am 20 years old. And I got involved in this as a young guy, and usually you don't see young people involved in politics. I know I usually lower the age in every room I'm in by about 20 years. And the reason I got involved was to see how egregious it was to watch this. I watched it pass through the Senate. I watched them sneak it through the Senate right around Thanksgiving. I watched it be signed on New Year's Eve when no one was paying any attention. And I looked through the language of the sections, and I found things that were so repugnant to our basic liberty and to our constitutional rights that I couldn't sit back anymore. I couldn't stand down. And so, being that it was recently the 4th of July, I think it's very appropriate to read from the Declaration of Independence and to show that in the Declaration of Independence actually sets out the purpose of government. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men." Now, the Declaration of Independence sets out that the purpose governments are even instituted is to secure those rights. And as James Madison and Thomas Jefferson pointed out, the reason for that is because governments have the key to those rights. They must be made to save them. Thomas Jefferson talked about the power, the ultimate interpretation of the Constitution must reside within the people. He was speaking in a letter to Mr. Jarvis written in the late 1700s. And he said, "You seem to consider the Supreme Court, you seem to consider the courts the ultimate ruler of the constitutionality of things. And what you have done is you have created an oligarchy of 9 men instead of the checks and balances we placed in the government. The ultimate power determining the Constitution falls to the people. It is the people themselves who are supposed to control the government, is supposed to be the government." Now, what happens when we rely on the Supreme Court? What happens when we rely on other governments, the national government, to safeguard our liberties? In 1942, 110,000 Japanese Americans were detained without charge or trial. In the case Korematsu of the United States, the Supreme Court approved of this. Eventually, Congress and the Supreme Court had to apologize to the Japanese Americans here in Oregon who were detained without a charge, without a trial, merely taken from their homes based on their race. The only thing that the law said, Executive Order 9066, was that the military shall be given jurisdiction over certain areas of the country. It said nothing about detention. It only said that we'll apply the laws of war here in America. And that's what the NDAA does. Quote from the NDAA, "Pending disposition under the laws of war," sets out that the laws of war are here. Senator Lindsey Graham, speaking on the United States Senate floor, said, "The world is the battlefield, including the homeland," and spoke about what would happen to an American citizen if, quote, "you even think about supporting Al-Qaeda. You have 3 things coming your way: death, detention, prosecution," close quote. Now, this is what happens when the local governments and when the sheriffs and when the people who take an oath to protect the Constitution fail to do so. What if, when those Japanese Americans were being detained, several of the counties said, "We won't allow that. That's unjust. It's an unjust law." What if when Rosa Parks sat in the back of the bus, the sheriffs, instead of arresting her, said, "That's an unjust law. There is no reason for us to enforce this unjust law," and then let her sit there? Now, there's a history of the states and the counties standing up to the federal government. In fact, most recently, in 1974, President Nixon signed the Emergency Highway Energy Conservation Act, essentially mandating that all speed limits in the entire United States be 55 miles per hour. As most of us in this room know, that would not be a good thing today. And New Hampshire was the first state to go, we have like 4 miles of road, and the federal government said, "We're going to take away your highway funding." We have like 4 miles of federal highway. Go ahead. After New Hampshire, other smaller states took on, then Texas, and then other states. And eventually, this act never was able to go into effect because the states said, no, we're not going to do it. Now the states are standing up again. For the first time since 1974, you see an uprising of the states pushing back against the federal government to keep it inside its constitutional bounds, keep it inside its constitutional power. PANDA is the largest organization in the nation. I founded back 29 days after the NDAA was signed into law. We are now the largest organization in the nation fighting the NDAA. We battled in 22 states. That means 22 pieces of legislation were introduced to challenge the federal government's authority to detain indefinitely individuals across the country. In fact, one of them came so close to being signed into law, it failed by one vote on the Colorado House floor. And so the states are standing up. Not only are the states are standing up, municipalities are standing up. Oakland County, Michigan, Weld County, Colorado, Lead City, Texas, San Francisco, California, Las Vegas, Nevada, have all passed resolutions refusing to allow the NDAA to be enforced and protecting their citizens' rights in their county and in their city. Now, today, I have, just after the meeting, just after this public comment's over, I'll present you with some resolutions. We've written up the sample legislation. We've done the legwork for you. And we've written up this legislation. More than happy to go through it with you. We also have a letter of support from a coalition across Oregon. PANDA works with over 100 liberty organizations nationwide. In Nevada, when our bill was stalled in the Judiciary Committee, we sent 3,000 calls to that Nevada State Senator's office. We reach 1.25 million people if we really push our luck nationwide and get people to come to the forefront. This is something the American public is very concerned about. In fact, I've only been in Oregon for a couple days, and I've seen the support already. I was speaking at a town hall in Coos County. 40 people showed up. You know how hard it is to get 40 people to show up to a meeting about politics. And you guys have seen this. And 40 people showed up because they're concerned about their constitutional rights and constitutional liberties. I was on a 2-hour radio show practically the minute I landed. That's how much concern there is, even in Oregon. And you've seen both your state senators, Wyden and Merkley, vote against this because of how dangerous it is. In fact, Merkley said that our efforts were very, very important to preserving the constitutional liberties. And so today, what I and my two compatriots here, Tom McCurgan and Shane Osmond, are asking to do is to review the resolution and to understand your oath to the Constitution. I've seen some of the liveliest conversation from this commission I've ever seen in county commission meetings across the country. And you're very engaged. You're very looking at the details. I really respect that. And what we're asking you to do is say no. Asking you to do is say, our citizens' rights are more important than our federal mandate, and our oath to the Constitution is more important than when the United States government says, and I quote, those who are reverent of individual liberty, close quote, are possible terrorists. That you refuse to allow that to happen in Klamath County. That's what I'm here for, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
About a revolution.
One day, somebody's going to have to say enough.